So when we talk about David Lynch and Lynchian in general, it's a bit difficult to pinpoint exactly um, where it lies. It's funny because his earlier stuff, like Eraserhead, um, I really didn't like those films. They have that off-putting negative emotion energy to them that I frankly don't really like, and really gets tapered down in the later films, which I did like because I enjoy a sense of uncanniness or a sense of that something is slightly wrong. And when something is slightly wrong, when everything is 90% to your expectations, but 10% of it, something's wrong with this photo, this picture, the background. When something's just slightly wrong, that's way more interesting to me because it's more of a thriller mentality. If you're watching a thriller, you can tell that there's a clue somewhere that you're, as the audience member, trying to follow and find and pinpoint and take out. And the problem with Lynch's earlier works is that, ironically, they're more entrenched in that weirdness and that strange uh, vibe without any semblance to reality. Eraserhead's very abstract. I forgot the other one with the name, but it has like three bunnies or three bunny people in this one room, and that's kind of like almost a still image kind of play. I forget the name of it, but Eraserhead is very abstract, where you'll just have different scenes come together. You'll have the Eraserhead baby. You'll have scenes where the chicken is bleeding. Just random weird stuff happens, and very similar or very authentic to Lynch's philosophy, says that movies are like music. They just move, and they just have a certain energy and a certain sound to them, and there's no point in dissecting or finding out the meaning, because it's just about how you walk away, how you feel about something. There are movies that make you feel really good and really bad, and movies like Eraserhead just make you feel really bad. There's nothing really redeeming or good about them. They're very artistic, I guess you could say, and it's so funny because usually when it comes to an artist, usually musical artists, I'm much more a fan of their early work, because that's where their core identity or their core ideas are most authentic and most raw in a sense. And it's very sad that you never hear someone say, "Oh, I like their new stuff more than their old stuff." No, you always like their old stuff more than their new stuff, because they lose touch with that main idea. They lose touch with what the current trend or energy is, and they end up, if they're really bad, selling out and adopting other aspects. Like, if you were an old rock band from the 80s and you started adopting auto tunes and whatever to stay relevant, it's just kind of sad and pathetic. But with Lynch's case, it's very much the opposite, because he's almost so extreme in an entirely artistic field that as he's made more and more projects over his career, they become kind of more mainstream, more I don't want to say corporate, but I mean, he did come back for a whole new season of Twin Peaks. It's like, the whole idea of doing a remaster or a return to a outstanding IP, simply because people recognize it. It's a very it's a very corporate kind of cliche thing to do, and not very artistic. But for me, peak David Lynch would be Twin Peaks and Lost Highway, and those were the things kind of later in his career, which were kind of interesting. So as he got more filtered out and he got more kind of closer to reality, I really enjoyed those works more, because then that weirdness, again, it got reduced from maybe what was 70 to 80% of the movie down to 10 or 20% in the background. You'd have characters like, oh, here's a general, here's the log lady, like, okay, I know that that's a human, that's a person, that I can tell that they live in this area, their dialogue is mostly understandable, their habits are mostly understandable, and it's not that they break character, but they elevate their character to this weird vibe where suddenly they talk about this dream that they had, and they'll describe it in vivid detail, or they'll have a scene where a character is hyperfixating on some redundant banal thing, um, or you'll have a character who will they'll either have a passion for something mundane like coffee or apple pie, like the main character of Twin Peaks, or they'll have some weird passion about something just completely removed from the story. And that's kind of similar to Tarantino in a weird way, where yes, you'll have the plot of the movie where they'll be going through, there's a bank heist and whatever, but then the characters will they'll take a whole scene just to talk about whether or not they should tip the waitress or not. And one guy believes in it, one guy doesn't. And it's funny that all those kind of pointless scenes, they're really there to develop the characters. And you could say Tarantino movies are really about the characters, and you could say very similar thing almost about Lynch's works, that it's about the human nature and how odd a normal seeming person can be. And I think that really, I don't know, I think that speaks to a lot of people, and I think that really is what the Lynchian style is that this seemingly normal character that you come to expect as one note or whatever has a slightly completely deranged side to them. The detective has a passion for crochet, or old movies from the 50s or something. Just something that they throw in there that, in a way, makes them feel more human. But I would say more so than Tarantino is the tone of Lynchian films. Is that there's kind of a sadness or a depression that's kind of effervescent throughout the work, in the sense that I think it really comes through with the music. The music really sets the tone for a lot of the scenes, and some of it is just very drawn out, depressing, kind of unnerving sometimes, and overly melancholy or overly joyous. There's always some kind of bittersweetness in everything that makes it it's just always off a little. Everything you come to expect is just a little bit strange and a little bit sad and a little bit odd. And just having a little bit of that helps to spice up the whole experience. And I'm really thinking mostly of Twin Peaks when I'm saying all this. But if I switch modes to Lost Highway, for me, it's my favorite David Lynch movie mainly because it is a thriller. It's less artistic than something like Mulholland Drive. I really don't like Mulholland Drive. I can see why people would praise it for the ideas or the style that it's shot in, but I feel like all the ideas in Mulholland Drive, all the themes, are just better represented in Lost Highway. And I feel like a lot of people don't talk about it, but what really got me into Lost Highway is the scene with the man at the party who goes to the main character, and they have the creepiest conversation I've ever seen, where he tells him that, oh, we've met before. And he's like, where have we met? Well, we met at your house, don't you remember? And he says, no, I don't think so. And he says, I'm there right now. He says, call me. And he calls him, and he calls his house phone using a cell phone, and the guy's voice picks up. It is the creepiest, weirdest scene, one of my favorite scenes in a thriller, I would say. And the rest of the movie becomes much more abstract to a certain extent. What I really appreciate is later in the movie they bring in a theme that was in Mulholland Drive that I really, really appreciate, where the characters swap positions. I don't actually remember Mulholland Drive that well. I think there's a blonde and a brunette, and about halfway through the movie, or maybe quarters through, the characters change, where the blonde girl now has brown hair, other girl now has blonde hair, and so they've changed hair colors, but they're still the facial structure. You can tell it's the same person, but their positions in reality and society have changed. And it's not even like a commentary on class, like, oh, she's rich now, she's poor. No, they're just two friends that suddenly are now in different relationships. And they pull that same switch with Lost Highway, where you have the Hollywood director producer guy, and I think it's a car mechanic, kind of young punk, and it's a really interesting switch because you kind of establish, okay, they switch bodies and you think, okay, I know what's going on, and then you see one of the guys, the director, he's in an insane asylum. Like, oh, okay, this was all in his head, but then the punk guy is there and he's there to look after him. Like, it does so many switching and interesting things in it that it's just really really I don't know, it's for me it's the most fun David Lynch because it's weird, but it's also exciting because you as the viewer are participating in unsolving this riddle, which ultimately doesn't, I think, really have a strong answer. Another thing I love about Lost Highway is the is the intro by David Bowie, I'm Deranged. um just a fantastic track that I think I might have heard before, but until I heard it in the context of Lost Highway, that movie made that song mean a lot more to me. And it says there's some lyric about, I see the angel man, he leaves me with holding my hand. I don't remember the exact lyrics, but it's something like that. Music, that song and that movie are on the same energy, the same frequency, and it's funny that I can bring back the energy and the feeling of that whole movie with that song. Previously, I was it's like, okay, whatever. So yeah, Lost Highway, I would definitely recommend. Just from a movie viewing experience, it's the most fun David Lynch movie. It's the most, I would argue, maybe interesting. You could argue his other work is more artistic and interesting, which, I mean, okay, I'd admit that. But Lost Highway is a lot of fun, of course. Twin Peaks. Um, but the idea behind Lynch is, I remember hearing that some game producer at Nintendo was actually inspired by Lynch, and I want to say it's Earthbound because that's the only game that really feels Lynchian in a sense, where certain characters, I mean, it is rare in that vibe where Earthbound is modern day America, but it's weird slightly. All the characters are slightly weird and of their own nature, and they're just slightly off. They're just slightly something off with them, and it's kind of an endearing kind of feeling that someone is supposed to be entirely themselves, their whole character. And even if there's something that doesn't seem to fit in this guy who looks like a general, this woman who's a log lady, just because there's something about that character that doesn't fit doesn't mean that it's wrong, that they might have a weird passion for something or weird quirk about them. It doesn't envelop their whole character, but it definitely exists. And it's a weird humanizing effect that it adds depth, complexity. And watching some of the interviews recently, now that Lynch has passed, he said one of his favorite movies was Lolita by Kubrick. And I always thought Lolita was a Hitchcock movie because it has the same story beats. But he said why it was his favorite movie is that there's so much depth that the character, the main actor, is it James Woods or James Dean, who unveils in that presentation, that movie, where it's more depth and more depth. His infatuation with Lolita, to possession, to paranoia, to revenge, to remorse, and then insanity. And that kind of, and it makes sense, of course. Lynch's favorite movie is Lolita because the kind of style that book is just it's more psychologically charged than it is sensational, if that makes sense. It's much more, it has much more depth and nuance to it than what people might. And that kind of makes sense that it reflects in his own work that there are characters who are strange, bizarre, weird, but there's something more to them that is revealed through their nature and through their experience. And I think that is kind of what Earthbound and Indie Toy kind of mirrors. That you have all these characters that, for example, there's this whole tribe of small little creatures that live in a cave on the far side of like the swamp in the world, and they're super strong but they're super shy, and so you need to get them a book about overcoming shyness in the big cities for them to move a rock for you to progress the game. That kind of uh serious silliness, that kind of treating a character with a side character with more depth than they need or that they deserve to serve the purpose of the overall story is, I think, what I think that incorporates Lynchian ideas, that he gives a character something slightly off about them, slightly weird, that gives them a depth that you just would not expect. And it's funny and it's surprising when you see this character open up and suddenly you think, oh, wow, I didn't expect that. And I feel when everything else is so corporate and contrived, predictable, how it's executed, how I can look at a movie poster or look at a game or book and expect, oh, I know exactly what this is going to say or what it's going to present itself as. There's no mystery here. It's all very predictable. It's so refreshing to look at David Lynch's works and just have this feeling of, I don't know what's going to happen. I have no idea what this means or what that means. And very similar to listening to music, it's totally abstract and it's really open to interpretation with no one's interpretation right. I'm not sure if he said it, but someone once said that once an artist reveals their work to the world, regardless of what their intentions were, the art takes on a collective consciousness interpretation or appraisal. One example would be that it's commonly referred or pointed to, movie King Kong was about African Americans and slavery in America as a metaphor for that, which is something I really personally don't believe. I think it was literally a movie about a big monkey that they brought to the city, and people have maybe put their perception or their interpretation over that. And it's interesting because Lynch's or the interpretation is that that's not necessarily wrong, even if the artist's creation had no such interpretation or no such agenda. It doesn't invalidate that other people can take that art to interpret something that's personal and close to them. I mean, I think I'd take issue if someone wanted to intentionally misinterpret art in a negative way just because they don't like it or they can't see the real purpose behind it. I mean, that's very much the case with a lot of Tarantino movies where people said you're glorifying violence and you're creating this experience that is, going to make kids shoot up schools, and we're going to just destroy your art because it's too dangerous. And that's something I don't agree with. I don't think someone should look at a piece of media and force themselves to see something negative because that might say something more about them. And sometimes there is art that is giving a purposely negative message that people are defending, saying, oh no, it's so cool, it's so hip, and really it causes, it might not cause someone to shoot up a school, but it cause someone to be severely depressed or something. So yeah, I can't really say or summarize Lynch's work in a very succinct, fast way, but it's just, I know, reflecting on what I feel about his work. I don't think there's anything I really love about Lynch's work, but I really enjoy it. And of course, games like Deadly Premonition, almost exact adaptations of his work. And I think it's something that I would like to see more of, where you don't want to have too much quirk in a character, because if that's all they are, then there's nothing interesting about it. You need to really balance the seriousness with the suddenly unexpected and silly aspects of it. You really want to keep it tapered down to like 10 to 20% of the character is that in their spare time they have some weird hobby, some weird opinion that they hate a certain brand or product, or that they love a certain brand or product. Having extreme love or hatred for something completely benign, I would say that's probably Lynchian. And just also the execution of shots and scenes that go too long, that have strange music, that when something sad is happening, you have happy music playing, and when you have something happy music, you have sad music playing, etc. And that's pretty much it.